Hello students, welcome back. And today we are going to learn about an editing software called OpenShot. Now by industry standards, we use softwares like Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro. However, the reason we chose this software, OpenShot, is primarily because it is open source, which means that it is available to you for free of cost. You can go to Google and download this particular software, which is small in size, and then for free of cost you can simply install it in your computer. Of course, there are limitations in the sense that you cannot compare it to Final Cut Pro or you cannot compare it to Premiere Pro, in the sense that there are many advanced features are given in these softwares. However, for basic editing, this software, particular free software, will be more than sufficient. So let's go on and learn this software. So students, I have already downloaded and installed OpenShot in my computer. This is the view of the OpenShot on my desktop. Now the first thing to begin with is I need to title my project. Right now, as you can see, this is an untitled project. For this, I will open my file and you can obviously choose a new project or you can choose save project as. So let's just click on save project as. So I'm going to name this project something. So for example, I'm just naming it test OpenShot, and I am going to suppose save it in my desktop. Right, so test OpenShot project is saved on my desktop. Now you can see that the name has changed to test OpenShot. So whatever work I do in this project shall remain in this project itself. If you want to at the same point of time, say suppose you are working on 2 films or you are working on 2 footages, you can simply go to file and start a new project, and that's going to be a separate project. Now let's first look at the layout of OpenShot. You can see that there are project file and there's one timeline. What do I mean by a project file? That anything you import, right, pictures, your footage, your audio will all remain in this section, right? This is the video preview. So whatever edit you're going to do in this timeline, you're going to see that thing on the video preview. Also, if you go into the view section, right, you can go to view and you can see that you can change your view. This is a simple view, this is your advanced view, right? So there are several, whatever you feel comfortable with. At any point of time, you would, if you want to revert back to your simple view, simply go to views and simply go, press simple view, and then it will kind of whatever you are comfortable with. What I do is also, once whatever I am comfortable with, I manually change my my view, and then I simply go here and then I freeze my view. So now unless I change it, it will not change. Before we start importing our files and so on, let us check what are we working with in terms of our settings. So for that, I will go to edit section. Yeah, you see the second tab, and we'll go to our preferences. So what is our current preferences, and if you need to change anything, you will. In this section, obviously there are some general settings which you can look at: volume, language. This is very important. So right now the final output, obviously I'll go into the output settings a little later, but the final output is 720p and 30 fps. So you have already learned these terminologies and these numbers, so I'm not going back, but of course you can change to whatever you are you want the final output to be in relation to what your footage is. Right. Another here important setting or preference is basically the keyboard. You can use all of it manually as well. So for example, you can see a scissor here, right? So I can go to a scissor tool and I can make a cut, or I can simply assign a hotkey to it from a shortcut to it, and then thereafter I can use these shortcuts. Obviously, if you are doing a lot of editing, I would say that you get these, you learn these hotkeys and thereafter you work with them. Now, let's start with importing your files. Now there are various ways of importing. One is I can go to File and I can here import file. Second, it's very simple. You can see a plus sign here. From here also you can import. And the third way of importing is also simply dragging it. So wherever in my computer my files are, right, I can simply drag. So for example, I am dragging one picture here. So you can see that it's there, right? Also I am kind of importing using the other sign, and I'm importing a music here. So I've imported, right? So this is basically your importing of your files, okay? However, at this point only, I will request you that you should catalog your files, in the sense that you name your files. Otherwise, if you're working with too much of footage, it becomes very difficult to later on catalog them, and then you often get confused with what footage what is. I also want to show you what happens when we import a video footage. So that was a picture and an audio, and this is a video. I have imported a video. Now out here, one is obviously I can drag it to the timeline and start working on the timeline. Is if you right click here, right, you see several options here. So one is import files, we have understood, and preview file is where you see what your file is about. So first thing you should do is preview your file. What you have imported, you preview it, right? Next, what I also advise is that right click, right, and here is an option of split clip. Okay, here itself, not in the timeline. Okay, so you press your split clip, and often we say, suppose we are shooting an interview, so there are portions before the interview and after the interview which we wish to delete, right? So or we only need certain parts of the interviews or clips. So instead of making that decision in the timeline, say suppose I decide this is the point I don't need, so I will just press start, and then again I decide that I only need it, say suppose till here, right? And then I end it, and then say I name it, right? I name it as clip 1, and then I write create. So you see clip 1 gets created. Out of the same clip, I can also again I can create a clip 2. So I'll play it, and now I decided, okay, I need just this part, okay? And then I again play it and say this is where my interview is ending. So then I again name it as clip 2 interview, right? Clip 2, say interview. So then I create it, right? End and then create. So you see, now what you can do is you can simply delete this file, remove from the project, and you have clip 1 interview and clip 2 interview, which you can then add to timeline with the plus sign, or a much more simpler thing to do is simply drag them. Right, so you see, what I did was a lot of my editing and naming and things like that is done in my project file area. I need not do it in the timeline. Let's see what is the other options. Add to timeline. You can check the file properties here. You can remove the project here. I hope this is clear to all of you, right? And always remember to check your file, right? Preview files from here. Delete what is unnecessary, and then name your project files so that you do not get confused with all of this in the timeline. Now let's learn about how to work with the timeline. Okay, so you've already understood how to bring things down onto the timeline. You simply drag them and bring things down onto the timeline. You can also delete by right clicking. Okay, let's go one by one. Okay, let's first learn about these tabs which you can see on your timeline. Okay, then we'll go into transition effects. We'll go on to it a little later. Now in these tabs, plus you all have understood is that plus is always with regard to addition, but this plus and this plus is a little different, right? You can see this plus is importing your files, whereas this plus is adding or adding tracks, right? So when I kind of you see track 8, so I have added a track. However, you have to first decide whether you need so many tracks. So I have decided, say suppose I don't need so many tracks, so I'll simply right click on it and I can remove tracks. Okay, so I am in the process of removing tracks now. Okay, you can see that the number of tracks are getting reduced. Apart from that, I can also rename tracks. So for example, I have decided that track 3, I am only going to use it for video. Okay, I am not going to use anything else in this track. So I will name it as video, and this is my video track. This can be track 4, can my picture track. Okay, so what else I can do? I can lock track. So once you lock, no editing is possible in that particular track, on that particular track, and obviously add track above and down is kind of self-explanatory. So let me just remove tracks, and because right now I wish to only work on 3 tracks. So now I'm going to work with 3 tracks, video, and I'm going to use pictures, and I'm going to use my audio. Okay, so this is clear. This is snapping, right? So when, say suppose you have 2 clips, right? So this is my 1 clip and this is my 2 clip, right? Is when the snapping tool is on, these 2 are going to snap. You see there's a snapping option there, okay? This is primarily the role, so that no gaps are left and so on. This is primarily the role of the snapping tool. Next, let's learn the scissor tool, right? So scissor tool, a lot of splitting etc. you have already learned in your project files, right? So you've already renamed your file and kept it ready for you to simply join them in the timeline. However, you will see that at many times, not everything can be done here in the project file. So you need to again make incisions and so on in your file. So for that, instead of seeing it in the preview part here, preview file here, we are going to again have a look at our footage in the video preview. Right, and say suppose I decide that I do not need the next half of the project. So I'll just simply make an incision here, and obviously you will use the hotkeys, but I'm not using them so that it's easier for you. Simply press the delete button, okay? Or for example, I can decide that I don't need from this portion to this portion, right? So I will just take my scissor again. I will make 2 incisions here. Obviously, I'll check everything in my video preview, what I need and what I do not, and then I'll press my delete file, right? So this is the role of the scissor, to make incisions, okay? Next is, this is add marker. So this is particularly important when your timeline is very cluttered, right? You need to come back to certain portions. Say suppose I know that I have to come back to this portion repeatedly. So then I can add a marker. When I remove my playhead, you see that there's a marker here, right? And next is quickly, the previous key points. Say suppose, yes, I'm kind of adding markers at several places. Say here I'm adding a marker and a marker again, right? And then with these keys, I can simply, I'll simply go back to all my markers. This is very important. Again, the importance of it might not be very clear right now because we have a cluttered timeline, but this will be extremely important when you're working with a lot of footage, okay? This is also very important. This is center the timeline on your playhead. Often when I'm running my timeline, so say suppose I bring in, I'm going to, and if I keep pressing this, so you saw that the playhead will always remain in my view, okay? So let's now edit something and see and using whatever you have learned till now. So I'm just importing the promo file of this particular course which we are going to work on right now, okay? And also we might not finish it completely because that will kind of take a long time, but nonetheless let's just start the process, okay? I'm not doing the preview file here, which I have asked you to do, right? And because I want you to learn how to work with the timeline, so I've started directly with the timeline. However, you should use both, the preview file option and the clip files here, making small files in the project file itself and then working with the timeline. Okay, let's begin. So as you can see, this is a redundant part, right? So we'll have to start from the point when I start speaking in the video. So this is redundant. Now it is you might find that it's very difficult to find that exact point from where she's starting, to talk. So for that, you often need to kind of make your file, stretch your file. So how can you do it? Simply by left clicking on the file on this timeline itself. So I've stretched the file and let's now make an accurate incision. So you match often with your lip movement. You see, I'm kind of having a look at the lip movement right now, and I see that this is the point. There is one. Yes. Welcome to massive open online course, Techniques of Ethnographic Filmmaking. The course is meant for BA Social Film. So you see there was a mistake here, so one needs to, as you can understand, often make an incision. Making. Okay, let's make a rough timeline. So I make an incision again. So this clip is done, right? So now instead of working on the rest of the footage, let's work with the small clip which we just made, in the sense we deleted what was not required with the aid of the scissor tool, right? Okay, now once we click on this particular clip, you see that we can do several things to this clip. For example, what are the things which we can do? We can add a fade, right? So we can add a fade to the beginning of the clip, to the end of the clip, or we can add a fade in the entire clip. Let me just show you this. Say suppose these are the two clips, right? And I have right click on this and I have added a fade at the end of the clip, and I have chosen fade out slow. So there's a fade added here. You can see the green dots here. So what happens? So you see what happened? Fade out onto another file. What else you can add? In a similar manner, you can animate. I am not showing each one of this because that will take up a lot of time. So please go ahead and play with all the features and you can see what it does to your footage. You can rotate your footage, right? Completely. This is very important. So this I'll show you. You can change the layout, right? So let's see what happens. I'm selecting. Remember that always you need to select the file of which you need to layout, and I'm going to, yes. So this is the layout which I have chosen. Okay. Now you see what has happened. This goes to the bottom left. So similarly, I've just shown you one option. Obviously, in terms of layout, you have several options. This is particularly helpful when you are working with two footages. So for example, I bring in another footage here and I want this particular footage on, I go to layout and then I put it on the top right. So you see this becomes interesting when, say suppose you are working with two different footages, right? Okay, so this is clear. Next, what other options are there? So layout is done. You can change your pace of your footage, right? You can change the volume of the footage, the overall volume of the footage. Obviously, we can separate audio. I'm just going to come to that, but if you want to change the volume from here, you can do so. This is again a very important point, you separate audio, right? So for example, I want to separate the audio here. Now when I click this, you can see that a separate audio clip has been created. Okay. you can obviously delete it and then the particular file gets muted, right? Or you can separately, again lower the volume and so on from here, okay? So this is also something which you should, or say suppose this is also very important if you want to remove what this person is speaking and instead add a piece of music here. So then what happens is, right, of course you can decrease the volume of this clip by going here and then by going to the volume, and you can reset the volume, so on and so forth, right? So I think this should be clear. So you can separate the audio completely, and whatever you have added you can also increase or decrease your volume. So you simply press volume, then you go to reset volume, you go to the reset volume, yes, and then you choose which one you want it for, the entire clip, just for the beginning, ending. So suppose entire clip, you want to reduce the levels and so on. So what you can also do is you can say suppose you have the dialogues here and you have the music here. So so for the music you can actually for the entire clip keep the levels at 30, right? So what is now you will have is both. So you have both music as well as you have dialogue. So you should basically play around with these features. Let's see what else is there. Remove clip is self-explanatory, and you also have transform, right? What is transform? Just clip, go on and say I'm just doing it with a new file with this clip. Okay, I'm pressing transform and you are going to single clip, right? Okay, sorry. Now when I am pressing transform, should bring my playhead here, you can see that I can manually do things to my file, right? So this is another option which you are given. Now let me show you the transition. So obviously there are myriad of transition, but we will use a simple one. For that we have used two footages. I am just going to add in a fade, right, between the two footage I have chosen. I can manually change the duration of the fade, right? So I have chosen a pretty long fade. Let's see. Right. So you can you simply saw how a fade was used in between two footage. Okay. The second option is effects. Now once again, OpenShot gives you n number of options with regard to effects which are possible. However, I will advise you not to use the effects, but if at all you wish to use, I'll just show you one option. So for example, you can choose the blur. So you can see that the entire video has now become blurred. Next and at last, I will also tell you how to export the file. So once you have created your entire timeline, the first thing which you need to do is select your timeline. Okay, select your complete timeline, go to file and then go to export project. Once you go to export project, you see that there are options here and just choose the export video. Okay, and simply when you choose the export video, here this particular tab will open where you will have they will show the settings you have chosen. So right in the beginning we chose HD, we chose 720p. Obviously you can change your settings, you can change your video quality. Instead of choosing high, mid, low, I will advise you to decide what is the exact video profile you are working with, what is the frame rate you are working with, and accordingly decide your video profile. Also, you want the final output in which format, right? You want it in MP4, you want it in FLV, MKV, MOV. MOV and MP4 are the usual formats in which you should work with. However, if you're working with only YouTube video or you don't need a very big file, you can choose the other formats, other smaller formats as well. And then you simply export your video. Okay, obviously you can choose your path here. I can decide where I want my final video to be saved and I can export my video. Absolutely similar, the same thing can be also done by using the red button here, which will which will open the same tab which you created, which we learned right now by choosing the file section. So before we end, one more thing which might come handy is how to add a title. For that, we simply go to the title section, you press the title, right, and then you choose what can be the possible options. So there's again lot of choices which are given to you. Say suppose this, you can obviously change font and so on, right, and add a name. So I am just writing my name here as a title, and I am going to, if I want to change my background color and so on, I can change as well, and I am going to save. Now you can see in your project file option, now this title is there, right, it's saved. You simply drag it to your timeline and you can add it before your footage. So this is basically a simple titling. We can also work on the exact position of our footage with the help of the location X and location Y. So when we change the location X or location Y, accordingly our position of our title will also change. To end it, my students, we'll go back to number 1 to the simple view, and to end it we have something fun in OpenShot as well. That is the emojis, right? So you can add an emoji whichever you wish to on your footage, and of course you can change the position and so on as per your requirement. So students, obviously OpenShot cannot be compared to Final Cut Pro or Premiere Pro. This is because software such as Premiere Pro and so on will provide you or will offer you several advanced features. However, for now, particularly when it comes to research, open source softwares, free of cost software such as OpenShot should be more than sufficient for you to tackle all your editing concerns. On that note, thank you.